let me talk a little bit about the early days of Strong Towns because I spent a lot of time exploring different developments that I had worked on and trying to understand the finances of them. And I started with cul-de-sacs and I worked my way up to arterials and frontage roads. And I was looking at urban developments and suburban developments and rural developments. And I found over and over and over again, none of these things cash flowed. None of these things made sense. And I actually thought I was nuts. I thought like there's something wrong because cities are clearly here, but by my math, they're all broke, right? They all like don't have the money. Then I met you, and you were coming at this from like a different side, a different way, the revenue side, and you were saying like, look, this kind of development pattern, which looks a lot like the traditional pre-Great Depression development pattern, financially does really, really well. It's almost, I called it foolproof in a post I wrote years ago, but it's almost like so productive that an idiot could do it, right? Like it's really, really good. And the further you go out in time post World War II, the more that productivity just drops off the ledge and goes negative. I've had this feedback that permeates my work, your work that I've run into, which is, okay, what you're saying makes a lot of sense and what you're saying is real compelling, but our cities are still here. They're still functioning. They're still around. Obviously, you guys are not explaining everything. And this is where I'd like to show some of the stuff we started working on last summer when we were together with the group at the summit we did at Disney Springs. So we got a group together last year. We had elected officials, we had kind of finance officers, we even had some media people who deal with this stuff. And we wanted to kind of talk about how do we take what is in a city's budget, a city's financial reports, and make that more accessible for people. We've been working on it. This was last June. We've been working on it ever since. And this month or next month, we are going to start releasing not only some of our findings, but a tool for people to use to do this analysis in their city. So I'm going to show you some of the stuff we put together for Houston. And then I got a couple, Kansas City and then Brainerd. These are ones we've already analyzed using this system. So last year, Houston's mayor said, our city is broke. He said, we are broke, we are bankrupt. It was kind of a dramatic statement. I wrote a piece about this that was one of our most widely read pieces last year. I think we think of Houston as being this city of robust growth, low taxation, let's go. It's often held up as this like dynamic place. And I understand it has a lot of those characteristics, but you get the mayor out saying, hey, we are broke. The actual quote in the article says they've got a staggering, and let's focus on that word for a second, staggering $160 million deficit. We put Houston through what we're calling our fiscal health assessment. When you go to the doctor and the doctor takes your blood pressure and does a blood draw and all those things, they give you an assessment of your health. Joe, you got good blood pressure, but high cholesterol, and like here, and at the end of that, the recommendation is like, here's what you need to do from a diet exercise standpoint to get back to healthy. Like we want to get you on a healthy trajectory. We have put together a fiscal health assessment to look at cities like Houston to try to get an understanding of what's going on. This is Houston's net financial position. So every year, Houston runs a surplus. When they put their budget together, they run a surplus or a deficit. And when you add up all those surpluses and deficits over time, you get their net financial position. This is the cumulative amount of, in their case, deficits that they've run over time. The mayor said we've got this staggering deficit today of $160 million. Well, they have accumulated $14.6 billion of deficits over time. That is actually 94 years of $160 billion budget deficits. The little deficit they're dealing with now is trivial compared to the overall amount of cumulative deficits that they have aggregated over the years. When we look at the printout on their health assessment, what we see is that they have accumulated a tremendous amount of liabilities. They actually have twice as much past spending that they have made that are beyond their ability to pay for than they have current budget revenue. Now, that has improved. It used to be 4 times. They have, in recent years, gotten on a better trajectory, but I want to talk about that here now too, because the fiscal health assessment looks at these things and says, okay, let's understand the trends. Let's see, is this current trend sustainable? Do they have the flexibility to adapt? How vulnerable are they to outside changes? When we look at Houston, what we see is that in 2016, they were actually insolvent. At Strong Towns, we say cities are broke, and people are like, well, Chuck, you're a little bit Chicken Little here. This is a bit hyperbolic. In 2016, Houston had more liabilities than they had total assets. This is not cash on hand, ability to pay. They've long been in the negative on that. This is actually, you add up all of the assets of the community and all of the liabilities. They were functionally insolvent in 2016. That has improved, and there's been a positive trend since. But we can say, where did that positive trend come from? The number one contributor of it, and we've analyzed like 36 different cities now, and we see this in most of them, was the pandemic relief funds. I'm going to go back a slide and show you that positive trend started in 2020 to 2021. That's when Houston and cities all over the country got a big surge of money from the federal government in pandemic relief funds. We also see Houston being able to, and again, this shows up in Kansas City and all the other places we've modeled for the most part, has seen historically low borrowing costs. So interest rates declining. One of the budget tricks that we see cities doing all the time is taking their higher interest rate debt and then refinancing it over longer terms, the same way that people do when they're flipping credit cards. I went from a higher term to a lower term, and you try to pay it off in the time. But, spreading that over time has allowed them to spend less of their budget on interest than they were historically doing. But you also see things like this. This is in a sense, how much of the useful life of their infrastructure do they have remaining, their tangible capital assets. Back in 2005, that was at 67%, which is not great. They had deferred a lot of maintenance. But as of last year, almost half of the useful life of their tangible capital assets have been used up. They are not maintaining, sustaining their infrastructure over time. I want to say these numbers are not numbers we've made up. They're numbers that come from the city's financial reports. So these are the city's number that they're reporting to taxpayers, but they are taken and put into graphic format so we can see the long-term trends over time. This is a process that is recommended, but not required of local governments. And so what we tend to see is that they don't report this information, even though they have it at their fingertips and could do it. What we're trying to prompt people to do is actually look at this stuff, because it takes the stuff that Joe's been doing, the stuff that we've been talking about for years, and puts it into these like broader long-term trends. Kansas City is another place where we've analyzed. Kansas City's net financial position is not as deep a hole as Houston's, but comparatively speaking, it's really bad, right? 3.6 billion. This is, again, the cumulative, add all their deficits up over decades, and this is what you get. When we look at their assets to their liabilities, they are not insolvent like Houston was in 2016 and is kind of bordering on now, but you can see the overall trend is down towards insolvency. A ratio below 1 means you have actually more liabilities denominator than you have assets. So you start to drop below 1 and you are broke. You are functionally insolvent. You are absolutely broke. When we look at even my hometown, this is Brainerd. Brainerd's net financial position looks quaint compared to Kansas City and Houston, because theirs are in the multiple billions. Ours is only 21.4 million. But I think what the important thing is, besides, the huge volatility that you see in small towns, is, as a function of what our overall capacity is, Brainerd's still pretty dire. We have way more liabilities than we have financial assets. We have analyzed going on 36, maybe 40, around that number of cities. We have not found one yet where this is positive. Again, you can call us Chicken Little. You can say, Chuck, it's really hyperbole for you to say all cities are broke. When we add up the components of the development pattern, we say all these negative numbers can't add up to a positive. When Joe does his work and we see it time and time and time again, where you put that map up and like, here's the green and then here's the red and the net is deeply, deeply red. It's like, well, there's no way that this works out financially. What we are doing here and what we are going to launch for people to be able to do for their own communities is actually look at the city's financial reports, the city's own numbers, and just be able to display them for decision makers, for the general public, for everybody to be able to see and understand how all of these negative numbers add up to this long-term declining trend. Everybody on this call is a member. So everybody is going to get this in their inbox. If you want to be the first in line, go to strongtowns.org/finance. You can also QR code this thing here. I'm going to shut this off in a second. What we're doing is we are about to launch not only a content series and a bunch of other stuff relating to this conversation, but we're going to take the spreadsheet that we put together, put it out there for everybody to be able to enter in their own community's information. We're going to have a little explainer video that shows you where to get it, how to do that, and how to put it together. And we're going to try to aggregate a bunch of these over a bunch of places. Our goal or our hope is that we can make these numbers not only more transparent for people, but more accessible for everybody. Because when we have this conversation, Joe's stuff is incredibly compelling. I think everybody here, I was participating in the chat as much as I could. I think everybody here is like, wow, this is amazing. This is astounding. But when we walk away from it, there is this sense of like, okay, all these other cities are really messed up, but my city seems to be out. They mow the park. It's not as good as it should be. They maintain the road. It's not as great as it should be. They're doing stuff like they're sure we've got a deficit, but they made it work. They figured it out. What we want to do is we want to take that sense of urgency that we feel because we have looked at these numbers. We've aggregated them out. We've added it up and like all these negative numbers don't add up to a positive. We want to make that very real for everyone so that you can have this conversation in your community and have it translate into not just better budgeting, but better development decisions, better land use practices, better neighborhoods, better places, better investments in our roads and streets, stopping the highway expansions, getting more housing built in places where we have existing infrastructure, ending those parking mandates and subsidies, doing all the things that need to be done to build a strong town. We're trying to give you the financial, the ability to have the financial conversation without having to be a finance major or an accountant or some type of finance officer to make that happen. So, Carly, Joe?
I want to add on to something. One of the things that you can find, and happens when I present, is that you just ask the city councilor or city commissioner that's in the room, do you have enough money to meet your budget needs every year? And they will always shake their head, and they know because they're cutting budgets, they're not fixing a road, they're deferring something, and they might buy some like nice little toy for like a pickleball court for the park because everybody wants pickleball now. And meanwhile, they're not hiring a police officer. It's like this is the financial calculus that happens every budget cycle. But talk to the politicians; they know, and they're usually like wide-eyed when this happens. They're like, "What do you mean we don't have enough money?" Like they always come to that conclusion. And I would argue that it's just I think what you're doing here, Chuck, is raising the fiscal literacy of all of us as citizens to make that part of the conversation. It's like it shouldn't be intimidating.
Well, and I think this is a good way to pass it over to Carly because Carly, you and I met Carly and got to know Carly, who's now our chief of staff here at Strong Towns. We met her in Lafayette, Louisiana, when we were digging into their budget and trying to understand these questions. And I think the thing I saw in Lafayette, Louisiana is the thing that I see repeated over and over and over. In Lafayette, Louisiana, we were there because you had a mayor and a city council that knew something was wrong, but didn't understand it enough and wanted to understand it more deeply. We had a staff that also said, we have a big system and lots of stuff going on. We want to understand it more deeply. What we have found, and I think this is even true with your, equity work, Joe, I think when we talk to assessors don't want assessors are not out to give rich people a tax break and stick it to poor people. Politicians are not out to defer maintenance and have things fall apart and not run a good city. We develop these kind of cynical thoughts about who these people are, but the reality is they're people like you and me who want to do a really good job and I think are trapped in a bad system. A big part of what we're trying to do is help them break out of that and create a new approach. And when they do, see those numbers go up, their prosperity go up, and all that translate into a better place to live. So, Carly, you are kind of the avatar to me of like what a good public official looks like. So maybe you got to take us home here.
Oh gosh, no pressure. Well, thank you guys all for joining. The chat was really active. We're gonna download it, put it into questions. Chuck and Joe will answer to those. Stay tuned to your email. You'll get a recording of this. You'll get Joe's PDF and other resources related to this, and we'll keep you posted as this season of fiscal health assessment begins, and as we help you dig into your community's budget so that you can help your community make good decisions. So thank you all for hanging with us a couple extra minutes. Great to see everybody.
Can I add one last thing?
Of course.
Just because I know these are all our friends who are members. The idea that we could take the time and energy to put something like this together is not possible 10 years ago. It's only possible today because we have 6,000 plus members who are all saying like, hey, we're here. Here's the resources you need to do this. So I think it's a good time for us to just say thank you again. Yes. We're really happy to share this with you, but we're also coming here really humbled by the fact that, you all are helping us make this happen. And not only that, but you all are taking the stuff we're doing and making a difference with it. So thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, absolutely.
It's amazing. All right. Thank you all. Stay tuned for more good stuff.